the top stories, a historian said the current Pan-Africanism movement is a struggle for Africa's economic and political independence. And Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority calls on private sectors to invest in the aviation industry. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Tabitha John. Stay with us. Every time the month of February, which is known as the month of Africans, arrives, the Pan-Africanism movement occupies the largest part of the issues that are considered and given special attention by Africans. This month is not only a month for AU Leaders Summit, striving to create a prosperous and united continent, but it is also a time to remember the victory of Adwa, which was a battleground for the liberation of Africans from colonialism. Talking to ETV, a professor of the history of Africa, Hakim Adi, said Pan-Africanism is a movement aimed not only to liberate Africa from physical colonialism, but also economic and political dependence. Johannes Ventahun has the following report.
Pan-Africanism was the attempt to create a sense of brotherhood and collaboration among all people of African descent, whether they live inside or outside Africa. Pan-Africanism initially, which is the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. Historically, Pan-Africanism has often taken the shape of a political or cultural movement. Speaking on the issue of Pan-Africanism, Hakim Adi, professor of the history of Africa, said with its narrowest political manifestation, Pan-Africanists envision a unified African nation where all people of the African diaspora can live. For Hakim, Pan-Africanism is more than this.
Pan-Africanism is really about the idea of and the struggle for the advancement of Africa and also the advancement of the African diaspora. So it's an idea and movement which is concerned with the unity of all African peoples, for their advancement and for their liberation. So not just the liberation of the African continent, but also the liberation and empowerment of the African diaspora. A movement that, has been around for a long time, certainly since the beginning of the 20th century, and in some senses, even before that. Today we see it mainly or partly expressed in the African Union, which is the union of all African countries, designed really for the advancement of the African continent, but also including as its sixth region, also the African diaspora. But this is just one manifestation of Pan-Africanism, because there are many other types of Pan-Africanism, not just those of the African Union. And we can say wherever there are problems and challenges facing Africa, or facing the African diaspora, facing African peoples, there we always find the kind of spirit and elements of Pan-Africanism. That is to say, people of African heritage, African descent, coming together to jointly address and solve their common problems.
Professor Hakim says that although the movement to liberate Africa from European colonialism has been successful in the past, and since Africa is still dependent on others in various ways, Pan-Africanism still has a struggle to achieve.
Africa is only united in a very limited sense. We have an African Union, but the big powers can still intervene in Africa. For example, the invasion of Libya would be an example. And Africa is not sufficiently united to resist that type of invasion. So there are advances, but there's still very big challenges. Economic challenges, but also political challenges, what people now refer to as the new scramble for Africa between the big powers. That is still a problem for the African continent. So advances, but still problems and challenges that need to be confronted and overcome.
As different parties are still doing different things in this 21st century, and apparently they are trying to scramble Africa again, Africa as a continent has a work to do, as it is important to advance African ideology for the development and unity of the continent, Professor Hakim added.
I would say there are two key problems that people identified in the past. One is what kind of economic system is adopted. If you adopt the economic system of the colonial powers, of the big imperialist powers, the whole imperialist system of states, it's going to be very, very difficult to have any kind of economic independence. We might argue it's impossible because the imperialist system of states is always going to have that control over Africa. The other thing which people adopted in Africa was the political system also of the big colonial powers, what they call representative democracy, which we know in the world is very often the political system, not very often, is the political system of the rich and powerful. It means the majority of people have no decision-making powers. So if you have no decision-making power, how is it possible to change things? How is it possible to have a say in how the country is run? So these two major problems are going to make it very, very difficult for Africa to emerge from this situation. If we can change that, then I think there are possibilities.
African Affairs Task Force says the UN needs to take into consideration for Africa to have a permanent seat at the UNSC. An interdepartmental task force coordinator told ETV that the African Union has started commendable works in terms of ensuring peace and security in the continent. Koshu Melissa has more on this.
A permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council is more significant from the perspective of sovereignty and to be heard Africa's voices in the Council. The demand by the African countries comes within the context of the need for reform of the entire UN structure, which is long overdue. Various African leaders have been pushing for permanent seat.
We repeat our call for greater representation of African countries on the Security Council.
It is unfair that the African continent, with 54 countries, is not represented.
In sideline with the 36th AU Summit, ETV approached coordinator of African Task Force at the UN. Tala Kabe, coordinator of the task force, said the UN needs to take into consideration Africa to have permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council.
To ensure that the African voice is heard, to ensure that our development priorities actually are understood and are also leverage to making sure that the international community through the United Nations take into consideration what the priorities of Africa are. And I think another point is that, we cannot talk about development or peace and security in the world without talking about Africa. Africa represents a significant part of the world in terms of population, in terms of growth. Most people say that, the future of the world in terms of development go through Africa, pass through Africa. So we see that with a lot of investment coming through the continent, a lot of resources skill being developed on the continent, and we can see actually example in Ethiopia, in other countries across the continent. So I think it is important the African voice be heard. It is important that what we stand for, our position in a variety of areas, peace and security, development, you name it, are really mainstream in the global agenda of the world.
Tala underscored that African Union has started commendable works in terms of ensuring peace and security.
The African Union is doing a great work in terms of ensuring that peace and security is at the heart of what the African Union stands for. There is support that is being provided to building peace, lasting peace, and also supporting transition from peace instability to development. This is happening right now.
However, unjust sanctions by the so-called superpowers under the pretext of ensuring stability remain threatening developing nations in Africa, the coordinator noted.
The Ministry of Labour and Skills said 1.4 million jobs were created during the last 6 months. In an exclusive interview with Ethiopian News Agency, Labour and Skills State Minister Nugusut Elahun said this is out of the 3.7 million job creation plan for the fiscal year. The State Minister revealed that 86% of the jobs created during the last 6 months benefited the youth, and permanent job opportunities were created for 2.38 million citizens amid the domestic and global challenges during the 2014 Ethiopian fiscal year. The ministry aspires to create 20 million new jobs within 10 years as part of the 10-year National Development Plan to be implemented from 2020 to 2030, the State Minister added. The ministry has been exerting various efforts to encourage, recognize, award, and create conducive business ecosystem for new entrepreneurs, including offering loan in collaboration with stakeholders. Negusu said the Development Bank of Ethiopia has currently readied 4 billion birr for loan to finance the new entrepreneurs to engage in various business areas after the conclusion of the training.
We are the gateway for all foreign direct investors. Perfectly having the peace will definitely help us and boost the potential of Ethiopia. Even during those conflict time, Ethiopia has a big potential. So majorly, more than $3.4 billion of investment has come last year. Kind of half cabinet will be at the board of Ethiopian Investment Commission. So this shows the commitment of government. So secondly is, the investor needs to know that majorly they have a question of repatriation of their profit. Actually, repatriation of their profit is allowed in our law. It's a very clear one. And the Ethiopian Investment Commission is ready to welcome you, whether you are local or foreign direct investors, to invest in Ethiopia. We believe that it's time to invest in our country. It's time to invest in Ethiopia. We are providing and making sure that we are doing the ease of doing business for the country, and majorly we are implementing the aftercare strategy.
The Political Affairs, Peace and Security Commissioner with the AU, Abdel Fattah Musa, urged Africans to unite for the development of the continent by scraping unfair Western economic dependency. According to the Commissioner, the socio-economic as well as political dependence is a deep-rooted problem in the continent. Kasahun Chani has more on this.
The Commissioner of Political Affairs, Peace and Security with the AU, Abdel Fattah Musa, called upon all African nations to strengthen sustainable development, elevate socio-economic burdens.
There is increasingly a convergence of views that Africa cannot depend upon the outside world for its economic growth, for its peace and security, and that everything must begin from the continent. So there is that growing belief among the African leaders. The most important thing is actually to transform it into political will.
The development of fundamental infrastructure facilities and focusing on the removal of potential trade obstacles are also necessary for economic integration among African countries. He pointed out that trade among African nations should be given top priority and further enhanced in order to assure economic progress.
How are we in the coming year? We are going to increase the trade among African countries rather than trade with countries outside the continent. Trade among African countries today constitutes just about 17%. And the continent contributes to global trade at the rate of only 12%. How do we reverse these negative trends? It's about removing those barriers. Both tariff and non-tariff barriers that affect intra-African trade, so that we can boost it. We've got what to produce. The continent, pound by pound, for pound, is about the richest continent on the world, the most endowed.
He also emphasized that with a population growth rate of 2.6%, Africa continues to have the fastest rate of population growth in the world, despite ethnic conflict, man-made disasters, the COVID-19 pandemic, smuggling, terrorism, using outdated technology, weak manufacturing connectivity, among others, are the pressing challenges in Africa.
Israel's ambassador to Ethiopia, Alilin Admasu, said Israel will continue providing free medical services for children with heart problems as part of the programs that supports children all over the world. 9 Ethiopian children departed for Israel to receive free life-saving heart surgery in the country. The ambassador made the remark at the send-off ceremony organized to send the Ethiopian children to receive treatment in Israel. The children are among those who have been waiting for surgery at a heart patient center in Ethiopia. The Israeli government will cover the medical expenses of the children and the parents who traveled with them, it was learned. According to Ambassador Alilin, the government of Israel will continue its support for heart patients. He further stated that Israel is ready to provide vocational training and technical support to strengthen cardiac treatment services in Ethiopia.
Welcome to the land of origins. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia is pleased to serve all your traveler banking needs. If you have money from any of these 16 countries, you can convert it to local currency by visiting our nearest branch. Alternatively, our secure Forex ATMs accept cash exchange, or if you prefer using your cards, we've partnered with Visa, MasterCard, and UnionPay so that you can withdraw cash from our local ATMs or make cashless transactions at thousands of local POS partners securely and with confidence. We are linked with more than 700 global banks through our direct SWIFT address, CBE Teta. We also work with 16 international money transfer agents, out of which Tune and World Remit enable you to make direct deposits into our savings and current accounts or our popular CBE Burr mobile wallet. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, the bank you can always rely on.
Salam
In business news, the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce and Sectoral Associations, ACSA, launched the 25th Annual Addis Chamber International Trade Fair, ACITF, at the Addis Ababa Exhibition Center in the presence of Addis Chamber of Commerce and Sectoral Association President Mesembet Shinkute, State Minister for Trade and Regional Integration Ndalo Makonnen, and high government officials. The chamber attracted more than 70 local and international companies, including those from Yemen and Sudan. Kasaun Chani reports.
25th International Trade Fair at the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce and Sector Association, with a team enhancing export for sustainable development, has officially inaugurated. Numerous local and foreign businesses are exhibiting their goods at the fair in order to build networks and connections for future businesses. Speaking at the event, Mesembet Shinkute, president of the Addis Ababa Chamber of Commerce and Sector Association, said that the government is undertaking efforts to advance a market-oriented economy that is based on the demand of global business.
International trade has now turned out into a tightly knit web of interconnectedness. In such a competitive global business platform, there are numerous sectors that come to the scene to play their own parts. Companies of different nationalities converge at a global marketplace with the aim of winning. Therefore, when it comes to trading, promoting one's own is of really a paramount importance. In this regard, dynamic and innovative promotional works enable suppliers to meet the taste and preference of buyers, upon which trust can develop between the two. International trade fairs, similar to the one we are staging today, among others, provide opportunities for exhibitors and visitors to conduct business talks, inspect items in person, and compare quality and prices of multiple suppliers.
On his part, State Minister for Trade and Regional Integration Ndalo Makonnen also underscored that his ministry is striving to promote export trade in addition to enabling the private manufacturing sector.
The major source of our foreign currency is our export sector, which is largely automated by the private sector. The government duly recognizes that the private sector should be in the driver's seat to our national economy locomotion. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you may all know, that government has been doing strongly in its capacity to achieve a projected economic growth of 7.5% under the current fiscal year. To this effect, the macroeconomic indicators achieved so far are promising in relation to achieving the projected growth by the end of this year. Special emphasis was given to the agricultural sector, the transformation of which can significantly contribute to the overall export growth. This is, however, cannot be achieved without a wider participation of the private sector.
Some participants from the manufacturing sector remarked that the show helped them to exchange knowledge, display their products, and further develop their businesses.
Okay, my name is Yaqeen Hassan. I'm from Sudan, and I'm here representing a Said factory for manufacturing and packaging food products. So we're a Sudanese-based company. We are a group. We own 3 factories. This is one of the factories. This is the newest one. It was established in 2016. We specialized in high-quality cheese products. We sell processed cheese, or we produce processed cheese. We take really good care of our products, and we take really pleasure in only importing high-quality material, high-quality raw material, even with our production. We take really good measures with it, so we can produce high-quality products, and we can also customize it to the local preferences.
The Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority has called on private sectors to invest in the aviation industry, including the construction and management of small airports and heliports. Speaking at a press conference, Civil Aviation Director General Getachew Mengiste said, although Ethiopia is a role model in air transport in Africa, the country is at a very low level compared to other African countries in terms of development of small airports used for domestic air transport services. Shagao Yamatao has the following account.
Airport is one key infrastructure for the expansion of air transport in the aviation industry. Currently, there are 22 airports, including 4 international airports, that are providing regular services in Ethiopia, despite insufficient in number and capacity. Speaking at a press conference, Civil Aviation Director General Getachew Mengiste underscored that, although Ethiopia is leading in air transport service in Africa, the country is low compared to African countries in terms of construction and management of air transports and heliports.
There are a handful of small airstrips that provide various services for mega projects, mining, agriculture, recreation, humanitarian and other uses. The country has a limited amount of airport infrastructure compared to the population of Ethiopia. The country has also limited airports compared to other African countries.
The reason for the limited number of airports in the country is that the construction and management of airports fall mainly on the shoulders of the federal government, Mengiste explained.
The problem is that the expansion of airports is slowly given to the federal government. As a result, the ACAA has formulated a rule and regulation that could involve private investors, regional governments, and city administrations and non-governmental organizations in the construction and management of air transports.
Explaining the principle of the directive on how regional governments and private actors participate in the airport expansion industry, Msrak Talahun, Aviation Regulation Acting Director General at ECAA, indicated that the airport infrastructure shall abide by a master plan and it also shall involve regional governments and private actors.
የኤርፖርት መሰረተ ልማት በማስተር ፕላን ነው ሊመራ የሚገባው።
The airport infrastructure regulation shall be governed by master plan. This means the master plan will be based on market demand and equity principle. It also determines how, where and when the airport will be built in the country. The directive also involves private company, city administrations, regional governments and other in the construction of airports and heliports.
Government, city administration, በኤርፖርት እና በሄሊፖርት ግንባታ ላይ ማሳተፍ
The authority has pledged to provide appropriate technical support for private sector airport developers and it has developed a system and monitoring mechanism to help private sectors involved in the construction and management of small airports and heliports, it was learned.
It was difficult to understand why Ethiopia didn't have a stock market. We scoured the world. For example, an economy of Ethiopia's size, but close to $130 billion, that doesn't have a stock market anywhere in the world, you can't find. So these are like the 5 pillars. Now, within each one of them, there are subsectors, right? So when we talk about manufacturing, Ethiopia has excellent opportunity to attract labor-intensive manufacturing, clothing, shoes, that kind of stuff. You know, one of the reasons I always focus on this is because labor-intensive industries that used to go to China. Simple word, Ethiopia is open for business. I mean, I think that's the best way to just, if we are to give it a tagline, open for business, right? But I will answer your specific. So, one of the most exciting reforms, what I call a mega reform, that has happened in the last 2 years in the economic sector, is telecoms.
And finally, drought trends in the Horn of Africa are now worse than they were during the 2011 famine, in which hundreds of thousands of people died. Close to 23 million people are thought to be highly food insecure in Somalia, Ethiopia and Kenya, according to a food security working group chaired by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the IGAD. The IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center said on Wednesday that below normal rainfall is expected during the rainy season over the next 3 months. Daniel Kasahun has more.
Drought trends in the Horn of Africa are now worse than they were during the 2011 famine, in which hundreds of thousands of people died. Close to 20 million people are thought to be highly food insecure in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya, according to a food security working group chartered by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the Regional Intergovernmental Authority on Development. The IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center said on Wednesday that below normal rainfall is expected during the rainy season over the next 3 months. According to the drought caused by El Nino and higher temperatures linked to climate change, now in the midst of ever more drought, the situation has become catastrophic, causing drops to rainfall and cattle to die. Drier than normal conditions have also increased in parts of Burundi, eastern Tanzania, Rwanda, and western southern Sudan, the center added.
Continues to do so now. This platform that has brought us together today was established 11 years ago by the heads of states of the IGAD region, EAC and development partners following the severe drought of 2010 to 2011. This continues to do so now at this most critical time when we are facing the worst drought in the life of 14 years of this region. In these last 11 years, IGAD has supported member states through IDRISI to develop joint programs that targeting regional issues through programs that address development challenges in cross-border areas.
Warqina Gabayo, the head of IGAD, urged governments and partners to act before it is too late. The drought, the longest on record in Somalia, has lasted almost 3 years and tens of thousands of people have died.
Border Development Facilitation Unit, piloted in the Karamoja clusters, service 4 countries, namely Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan, and Uganda, is now being scaled out to other clusters through various programs supported by IGAD, including the Borderland Resilience Project in collaboration with UNDP. Similar efforts are underway with the support of the European Union to build on proceeding cross-border development projects in 3 clusters of the region.
Nomadic pastoralists are among the hardest hit by the drought, which has left exceptional numbers of people without most of all of their livestock. They live on harsher lands and receive less support from governments. More frequent droughts are making it harder for people to recover between shocks, making them more vulnerable to the next crisis. Last month, the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Somalia warned excess diets in the country will almost certainly surpass those of the famine declared in the country in 2011, when more than 260,000 people died of starvation.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's a reminder of the stories making headlines. A historian said the current Pan-Africanism movement is a struggle for Africa's economic and political independence. And Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority calls on private sectors to invest in the aviation industry. That's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and take care.